All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this month's Portals Community Call. It's March 2023, and I'm Jason Gumpert from MS Dynamics World. Really pleased to be able to host once again for this event. As always, I'm joined by our presenter and Microsoft MVP Nicholas Hayduk. Great to have him with us as always. A couple of notes as we get started. One, you can ask questions anytime today. Please look for the questions block in the webcast interface, and Nick is always keeping his eye on that, as am I. Also, we are recording today's event, so we will be making that recording available to you after the session ends. Without any further delays, though, I'm going to hand things over to Nick to get us started.
Awesome, thank you. And Jason, I think you pronounced my last name better than anyone else. I always get a lot of "hey duck" or something, but you know how to pronounce it, so I appreciate that.
3 years of practice.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending this this session today. Hopefully the weather's treating you fine if you're on the northern part of the world. I know that spring is on the way for us, so we're hoping to see some snow melt here over the next few weeks. So things are looking up here. I guess if you're in the southern hemisphere, I guess good luck with the upcoming winter. Today we've got a topic which is deep dive into forms and multi-step forms. So that is our topic for today. So let's dive into our kind of typical stuff that we do here at the beginning. So if you're new to these calls, quick introduction. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm with Engineered Code Consulting, Inc. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been working on Power Pages, Power Apps, Portals for the last, since about 2009, 2010, so the last 12, 13 years. If you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, or if you don't follow us on Twitter, you can see my kind of social media there. I've got a blog, which for the first time in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, I finally put out a new blog post, so hopefully there's some people that got some value out of that. We've also got our YouTube channel where we post not only these videos, but we post our weekly Power Pages tips, as well as crm.audio, where our Refresh the Cache podcast is hosted, and I do that with George Dubinsky. So I think since we last chatted, there's been 1 or 2 releases of that, and we've got a few more in the queue already. So keep an eye out for more podcast episodes if you're into podcasts. As always, I want to say thank you to Mr. Gumpert at MS Dynamics World for his support on this endeavor, which is now multiple years in the making, as he mentioned. So no greater team to work with than those folks. So really happy to have them aboard as always. So we do have a little bit of news, not a ton of news. I guess you can expect release notes to come out every month, or for there to be brand new features every month. I know that, back in the day when Portals first came out from Microsoft, we could literally go like 6-7 months without there being really any significant news. And so now when there's one slow news month, it's like, oh, something new coming. So this is more of a quiet one. And then we'll get into our deep dive topic, and then we will talk about our next community call, and we will leave some time from questions. I see we've already got a question from Jim. We'll maybe cover that as we get into our topic here. So I will first quickly go through the news, which is just, I want to highlight a couple of some community content. So one is Mr. Nick Doelman, former MVP, now the guy responsible for much of the documentation that you see on Microsoft Learn related to Power Pages. So he does have a blog post, which coincidentally is related to the topic that we are talking about today, which is forms. So if you're looking for another perspective or just some additional material, definitely check out his blog post. The other one is from Franco. Franco has been a presenter here on this call in the past. He is responsible for the Spotify clone. So that was really cool. If you missed that one, go check that one out. And he is doing a lot of Power Pages stuff. So he's got a number of blog posts out over the last few weeks, working with full calendar, comparing dates in Liquid, embedding Canvas app. So definitely go check out his blog if you're looking for more Power Pages content. All right, and that's pretty much it. Like I said, there wasn't anything on the Microsoft blog. There wasn't really any kind of new features or nothing kind of groundbreaking over the last month or so, which is kind of to be expected since last month we did talk about the release notes, and that's where all the fun news comes out of. So let's talk about today's topic, which is a deep dive into forms and multi-step forms. So I don't have any slides prepared for this, so we're just going to really just go through some examples, walk through the actual interfaces, and talk about what forms and multi-step forms are and why they are probably the most powerful feature that exists in Power Pages. So let me get my browser up here. Here we go. And let's talk about forms and multi-step forms. So the first thing to know about forms and multi-step forms is hopefully you have a background in Dynamics CRM, Dynamics 365 customer engagement, or model-driven Power Apps, because Power Pages is based on those technologies. That's where it comes from. It comes from the world of Dynamics CRM. So when we talk about building forms and multi-step forms on Power Pages, what we're doing is we're building forms in Dataverse, so forms that would, historically been shown on on Dynamics CRM or a model-driven Power App, and we're taking those and we're exposing those onto our portal. So the old way of working with that would have been to go to make.powerapps.com, and I say old, I mean it's only been a few years before you used to go into advanced settings and go to solutions, but this is, for the last couple of years, this is how you do it. You'd go into make.powerapps.com, make sure I'm in the right environment here. Then you'd go into your solutions. I believe I've got one here called NH Golf, because everything I do for fun is golf related. We've got the Masters coming up here, so if you know anyone who can get me on Augusta National, you would be my new best friend. So there's my usual plug on that. But I usually kind of use golf as in kind of some of my samples here. Just got to move that. So we're in the right environment. We've got our solution here, and in here we have a number of tables. So we've got our golf model-driven app, and we have our golf course hole, and our maintenance request table. So if we talk about a form in Power Pages or a multi-step form, what we're talking about is taking a form that was, kind of originally built for a model-driven app, exposing it onto our portal, and allowing users on our Power Pages site to submit data or edit data that exists directly in Dataverse. So forms, multi-step forms, are all about allowing users to interact with data that's in Dataverse or potentially elsewhere if you're using virtual tables. I won't get too much into virtual tables today, but I will mention that in theory, virtual tables are supported on Power Pages. So, there's no reason that it shouldn't work. It may not work because virtual tables are still relatively new, and kind of the edit capabilities are still, somewhat new. So you may run into some gotchas there, but kind of as a general idea, it is supported to use virtual tables with forms as well. But we're going to focus more on data that's in Dataverse. So we have our tables here. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to go into golf course, and I can look at the various forms that we have. So in terms of the actual forms, now you'll notice that there are quick view forms, there are cards, there are main forms. For the most part, what we're doing on Power Pages is we're dealing with main forms. We're saying, hey, I want the user to be able to either view or edit data from Dataverse, and the way I'm going to present that to them is on one of these forms. So for example, if I look at this golf course, I open up this information form, I will see the layout of the form. Now, I'm not going to be talking today about how to design all these forms. I'm either assuming that you're familiar with model-driven app forms, or that that's something that you're going to learn. But long story short, what you can do is you can drag field columns on there, put them on the form, subgrids. Now, the one thing I did want to talk about is what is supported with model-driven app forms on Power Page and what's not. So I usually kind of guesstimate that it's roughly about 80% of things that you can do on a model-driven app form you can do in Power Pages, and kind of vice versa. There are some things that we'll talk about that are specific to Power Pages that you can't do kind of out of the box with model-driven app forms. But unfortunately, it's not like exactly what you see is what you're going to get. So as an example, on a model-driven app form, these days we're back to tabs. For those of you who've been around since, I've been around since CRM 4, we used to have tabs. Then they went to one long form with all the different sections, and now we're back to tabs. When ADX Studio first built the Power Pages product, that was in the day where it was one long form, and that's how that data is represented on Power Pages. So even though we do have tabs, we could have tabs on this particular form, they will still be displayed as kind of one long form in different sections on Power Pages. You won't see actual tabs on Power Pages. But there is kind of general support for most of the field types that you can create. Text, whole numbers, drop downs, lookups. There's also support for subgrids. So if you have a subgrid on a page, it will show up on Power Pages. Is there support for PCF controls or code components? If you configure that on one of these, it will display on the portal. I do have a community call on PCF controls, so check that out if you want to know more about that. But just at a very high level, they do work, but you have to know that generally you're going to want PCF controls that were designed specifically for Power Pages for styling reasons and to make sure that they are compatible with Web API, that sort of thing. But at a high level, PCF controls are supported in Power Pages as well. So the things that you can do on here are put your fields on the screen. The multi-select is supported, the file and image type columns are supported, all those things are supported. There are a few things though that are not supported. And the couple big ones that we run into all the time are business rules. So if you do configure business rules on your form, Power Pages couldn't care less. Business rules are in no way transferred over to Power Pages. So if you do need advanced business rules type logic, conditional validation, that sort of things, that needs to be implemented in Power Pages using custom JavaScript. Power Pages does respect things like required fields, but anything that you configure with business rules are not supported. The other big one that people that's often disappointing when people find out is business process flows. So if you have those kind of nice wizard that shows up at your top of your form that steps you through all the different steps of your process, you could have that on your form, but the portal is going to ignore that. You're not going to see that at all on Power Pages. So those are a couple of the big gotchas. Business rules, business process flows are not supported with Power Pages. So if you need that type of functionality, it often involves some custom development. But aside from those, again, pretty much all the different column types, subgrids. The other one that's supported is the timeline control. I think that's what maybe Jim had asked about as well. And we'll get to that question here in a second. But the timeline control, so the ability to add notes or activities, that's also supported in Power Pages. So there's specific support for that. But essentially, if we're creating a form, what you do is you create this form in here, and then what we do is we add that to Power Pages, which we'll talk about here in a second. I'm just going to take a quick peek here at the questions just to see if we've got anything here. So first one here is from Jim. So we've got overall topic question. We are looking to implement an employment application form where we want the applicants to upload a separate cover letter and resume. Ideally, their uploads would go into a specific file type column for each one rather than notes. Is this possible with multi-step forms? Yeah, that should be possible. Both forms and multi-step forms support the new file types. So I don't think there's any reason why that shouldn't work. If you are running into any limitations, let me know. But yeah, no, I don't think there's any reason why that wouldn't work with multi-step forms. All right, we've got a couple questions from Zoe. So regarding basic forms, I've learned that you can't hide show dynamically with business rules to do, oh, I think I may have already answered this one. Google tells me JavaScript, but is there any other way to do that without JavaScript? If JavaScript is the only option, what record do I put the JavaScript in, the basic form or the web page? Oh, excellent question. I'm trying to remember what the most recent topic that we covered on the podcast, but so I guess quick answer to those questions. Really, JavaScript is the only way. I think I'm aware of potentially some partners that might have some kind of low code options for doing business rules. I don't know if they sell those or not. So potentially doing a Google search, you might find some sort of offering where you can do a more configuration based approach. But really, more often what we do is it is just kind of JavaScript using jQuery. So in answer to the question about where do you put the JavaScript, the basic form or the web page, I typically put it in the basic form. But what I would do is I would point you towards, I do have a blog post series on that. Let's see if I could find engineered code where JavaScript code maybe. So it's not that one. Oh yeah, where's that Dynamics 365 portals code? Now, if you haven't kind of heard my whole spiel on this, it says Dynamics 365 portals, which is the same thing as Power Apps portals, which is the same thing as Power Pages. So all of this stuff applies. So if you find old blog posts, for the most part, don't worry about it, it'll still apply. But essentially I have I think it's a 4-part series on all the different places you can put code and kind of where I like to put it. But the short answer is I like to put it kind of in the most specific places possible. So I normally put it on the basic form because that form could be used on multiple pages. So if you put it on the web page, you then would have to copy and paste that JavaScript around, whereas if you put it on the basic form, it kind of moves. So if for whatever reason you want different JavaScript on for the same form on different pages, then you would put it in the web page. All right, and then another question. And there's a question about the podcast, so I'll just show that while I'm sharing my screen. So if you go to crm.audio, you'll see here that our last podcast here, which was released February 21st. So that's where we're talking about the release notes. So it looks like the podcast about where to put your code hasn't been released yet, but it was recorded. So I would expect that pretty soon. All right. So, sorry, and then back to the next question here from Zoe was also, can you update the Bootstrap styling for basic forms? When I open a page in VS Code, it's just referencing the form, and I can't find where that form code lives. So we will get to that. I'll kind of show how does that form even get on the page. So we'll talk about that. And then I got one other question here. Could you create a new form portal view rather than hide fields? Yeah. So in terms of the actual forms and my personal best practice, I always create separate forms that are specific to the portal. Now, did I follow my best practice here? I can't remember. Yeah, so you'll see here I created information-web. So this information one is the one that I use in my model-driven app, and this is the form that I use on the portal. In fact, this question even came up when I was meeting with a client today, where they were talking about creating new views, and I kind of told them, even if today the form is the same as one you're using elsewhere, or your view, because we'll probably talk about lists maybe next month or for sure in the future, even if your views or forms right now are the exact same, in my experience, they almost always end up being at least slightly different, even a slightly different column order for your portal. So I always create a separate view or form specifically for the portal. So you can definitely, I definitely recommend doing that as my best practice. So, okay, so let's talk about, so let's assume that I've designed a form here. What do I actually do to get that into Power Pages? Now, I also wanted to show something because I showed you how to customize this in Power Apps, so make.powerapps.com. What I'm going to do instead is go to make.powerpages.microsoft.com. So this is the newest, latest, and greatest editor for Power Pages. And when we go there, it's going to give me my list of sites. I'm going to go into my Power Apps portal site here. I'm going to click Edit, and that's going to take me into the Power Pages Design Studio. Now, the end goal with this product, at least my interpretation of kind of what Microsoft is doing, is at some point this is going to be kind of the one-stop shop for designing Power Pages, and our ability to customize forms and views, actually you can do right in here. So you don't even have to go to make.powerpage or powerapps.com. We can design things right in here. So I can go into my table, I can go into here and look at, here are the forms, here are the views, here are the forms. So I can open up my information web, and I can edit things here. Now this doesn't give me everything I need. So I can add field here. So I can see here, I can create a new table column. So you can create things, but not absolutely everything is available here, but it's, it's going to get you probably most of the way that you need. So I could kind of drag and drop fields here, do this whole editor, and that's what the data workspace is. So this data workspace is to essentially replace the need for going over to make.powerapps.com. And one of the more recent features that I think I might have talked about last month is, and this is kind of a game changer, is you do have the ability to tell it which solution you want to use when editing these components here. That's relatively new. Before, when this first came out, it was kind of always put into the default solution, and people were not fans of that. So now I can actually go in here and say, hey, actually, when I make changes, put this into my solution. So that is awesome. So I can edit my actual forms here, and that's where I'm kind of customizing the look and feel of it. But that is just the model-driven app form. That's not the actual form that appears on Power Pages. Now, before Microsoft changed the name of everything, it was a little bit easier to kind of distinguish what a form that's on the model-driven app versus the form that appears on Power Pages, because the forms that appeared on Power Pages had a different name. So again, because you could probably find a ton of blog posts from me and other people that uses that same terminology. When we talk about a form, just know that they used to be known by a few different names. So they originally, when they first came out, they were known as entity forms. Then they got renamed to basic forms, and now they're just known as forms. So when we talk about putting a form on a Power Pages site, we're dealing with forms which used to be called basic forms, which used to be called entity forms. So, and there's kind of a direct correlation. So when you're building a form for Power Pages, you reference your form from the model-driven app, but then you can apply additional logic on top. So think of a form in Power Pages as you select a form from a model-driven app, and then you add more configuration. So let's just assume I've created my information web form here for golf course. I want to go into a page, and I'm going to go onto my actual golf course page, and you can see that I've already got the form. Oh, sorry, that's golf courses. Oh no, sorry, that's golf course. Yeah. So how did I get here? Essentially, all I did is I clicked the plus button, and we've got an option in here to create forms and multi-step forms. I can also create lists, Power BI, a whole bunch of other things. But I'm going to create form again because I'll just kind of go through this again. So when I'm creating a new form, what I could do is I can create a new form, or I can add one that I've already created. So I could just select golf course again, but in my case, I'm going to say, hey, I want to start from scratch. So when we're showing a form on Power Pages, again, this is tying back to a model-driven app model-driven app form. So the first thing I got to do is select a table. So I'm going to say it's golf course. Then, as we might expect, we have to select which form do I want to choose. And so this is the list of those main forms from my Dataverse environment. So I'm going to select information.web, and then here is what do I want to name the actual form. And we'll see where, if we go to the portal management app, which we'll go to in a bit, we'll see what that's called. So says this is a form which one you're existing. Yeah. So I'm going to call this golf course during portals community call. So I can click OK. I'm going to just remove this one. It's not really supported to have multiple of these on one page, so I'm going to just remove this one just so we don't run into any problems. So we've got our form here. Now, this is a screen that I had when I was creating it. So let's look at some of the other options here. So the first thing we need to know is, what is this form going to do? Is this form going to create a new record? Is this form going to update an existing record? Or is it read-only? Those are our three options. In this case, what I'm actually going to do is, I don't think I actually have the ability in my current iteration to create a new golf course. So why don't we just add that from scratch? So why don't we create a new page, create new golf course. Yeah, I can start from blank there. Click add. Here, again, I'm going to add a form. And I'm going to just start editing. I'm going to add the existing one that I just created here. So there's my form. I'm going to go to edit form. I'm going to say, I want this to create a new record. I can choose what happens when I submit it. So do I want to display a message? Do I want to redirect to another page on my site? Or do I want to redirect to a URL, which can be an external URL? So in this case, I'm going to say, thanks, we got it. And I'm going to say, yes, I want to hide the form when it's submitted. I can then choose whether I want to show CAPTCHA. So just to keep things simple so you don't have to see me fail CAPTCHA, I'm going to turn that off. And then I can choose whether I want to enable attachments. Now, if I enable attachments, what this is going to do is the user will be able to select those attachments and it will upload those as notes related to this particular record. In my case, for the golf course thing, I don't care to do that, so I will leave that turned off, but you can enable this. This is powerful, especially when you're creating a record, because normally, if you attach a note, you first have to save the record first, but this allows you to actually have notes attached as part of the creation process. So that's a cool little bonus if you need to do attachments as part of the create of a record. So I'm going to click OK there. So now we've got this form, and it's actually showing me a preview of what this form is. And just so you folks know, this kind of interface for actually editing and creating forms within the Power Pages Design Studio is relatively new. There's been kind of basic support for creating forms in the old Power Apps Portal Studio, but this interface to do a lot of this in here is all relatively new. So we looked at the edit form options. Now we can edit fields. So edit fields takes us to our screen interface. So that's just kind of a quick view right into the data screen. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to here. So now let's talk about, so we've got permissions. We've also edit or duplicate and delete. So let's talk a little bit about permissions. Now, I've had other calls on table permissions, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time today talking about table permissions, but it's important to understand that basically all of these forms enforce table permissions. So if I want anonymous users to be able to create golf course records, I would need to enable those permissions. So we won't do that just to see what happens when we don't, but so for now, there are basically no permissions. So I've created this form. It says I can create a golf course. I've added this form onto the page. Let's see what it looks like when I preview. So this is on my create new golf course page. You can see here it says you don't have the appropriate permissions. So the form is smart enough to realize that, hey, the user that's coming to this, which right now I'm anonymous, I haven't signed in yet to my site, doesn't have the ability to create a golf course, so we're not even going to show them the form. So here I'll go into permissions. I'll say, this thing's even smart enough to say that the create permissions must be added to allow your users this. So I'm going to create a new table permission. I'm going to say anonymous golf course create. And in this case, I'm going to put in golf course because that's my table. And I'm going to say create. And because I want this for anonymous people, I'm going to say anonymous in my roles here. I'm not going to let administrators do it. I'm not going to let authenticated users. I'm just going to let anonymous users do it. So we've got anonymous users. We do that. Now it's warning me. We've talked about the quote unquote portal hack that occurred about anonymous data being shown, or data being shown to anonymous users. So Microsoft is super making you super aware of what it is you're doing. In this case, I'm letting anyone submit a golf course record. Maybe that's not ideal in many cases, but that's what I'd want to do today. So now that I've set that permission up, we go back to preview. Let's see if this makes my form appear. So there it is. There's my form. Now you might be asking yourself, where's the subgrid? A subgrid, similar to how you need to create a record to add notes, you need to have a record in order to interact with the subgrids. So by default, in the create of a golf course, you won't see that subgrid of all the holes. So I'm going to call this one test golf course. I'm going to say submit. And there shows the message that I configured. Thanks, we got it. And that's it. That's a basic, and that's why they call it a basic form. That's kind of as simple as it gets. You design your form in the model-driven app kind of form design experience, or in that data workspace. You then you add that form to your Power Pages site. You configure the permissions, and if I were to go back into make.powerapps.com, I'm going to open up my apps because I have a golf course app, which is my model-driven app. No. I don't know why I can't play it. Let's see if I can get to it that way. There we go. Oh, guess I should have tried that earlier. I don't know why my golf course app is unavailable. Might need to. Oh, that's weird. I don't know what happened to all my fields, but anyways, you can assume that that record that I created does show up in the list of golf courses. So that operation created that record in Dataverse. All right, I'm going to pause here just for a second to just go through the questions. Okay, so Wendy's asking, could you add a form from a template? For example, the scheduling multi-step form. So at this point, there really is no kind of templating from, there's no like copy from anywhere else. So your options when you're creating them is basically create a new one where you select the model-driven app form, but there's no template, and especially for like multi-step forms, if there's like 4 or 5 different steps, like there's like the schedule a meeting with a financial institution template where they've got a 7-step form for booking a meeting. You can't say, oh, just can I add that one? You'd actually have to get that data into Dataverse to begin with. Okay, I see the follow-up from Jim. So sounds like, Jim, the ability to include a file field on a form, you need to actually have it created first. So I wonder if it's the same kind of limitation with the subgrid. But if you're using a multi-step form, you could kind of have a 2-step process where the first step is to create the record, and then the second step is to do that. You may not love the idea of multiple steps, but I guess maybe just the way that it's architected, you need to have that record there before you can interact with the file column. So okay, so I did want to address the other question we had, which is the bootstrap styling of the basic form. And basically, how does this form, when we get it onto the page, how does this form actually get onto the page? Because there's actually a couple of different ways to do that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to see if I can get my extra toolbox up here. Taking a second to load, of course. Portal code editor. All right, got my, so what I want to do is I want to look at that page I've created and actually look at how did that form show up there. I added it via the Power Pages Design Studio. So if I look in this one right here, I go to Web Pages and I go to New Golf Course Hole. Why don't I see New Golf Course Hole here? Did I call it something? Oh, sorry, create golf course, create new golf course. Sorry, lost my mind there a little bit. All right, so here's my actual page, which if I scroll over to the side, you can see that within the editor, I'm going to just minimize this. If I go all the way to the end, we'll see that what it's actually done behind the scenes is it used Liquid. Let me bring this down to the next line so we don't have to worry about the whole thing. It's used the entity form Liquid tag with a parameter where the name is the one that I had selected. So this is why I think it's good to know what the historical name of fields is, or the historical name of some of these features are, because all of the Liquid tags still reference the oldest name, which is entity form. So this is how that form actually gets placed on that page. We've got an entity form Liquid tag, and so this Liquid tag, if we looked at, say, the actual source code of the page, go into there. If I right-click, say, View Page Source, and if I compare that against this, so I'm going to look for this section block layout, you can see this whole kind of div, which references entity form, is automatically inserted by the server-side Power Pages site code. So you don't really have, well, we'll talk about how you can control that a little bit, but in terms of the actual like layout of things, you can control the layout by controlling the layout of the form in the model-driven app side of things, but you don't have control over the very specific markup that it generates, which is the Bootstrap version 3 markup as of today. So what do you do if you need to kind of adjust this? Well, first you modify your Bootstrap theme so that it gives you the details that you want. So if you want this to have cornered or rounded corners, you can do that. If you want the name to be a different font, a different size, different color, all that can be achieved with CSS. Beyond that, you can kind of resort to advanced JavaScript techniques to start moving things around. It's possible, as long as the name of the field doesn't change. For the most part, the data should work fine. But that's essentially how this gets on the page. Now, that's kind of one way. There is a different way. I would say it's a more historical way, but I did want to point it out just so that people were, in case they'd have ever seen the lookup in the back end. But how we kind of used to do it was, if I go into my model-driven app, so this is the portal management model-driven app, where I guess I haven't updated my solution. So this one still says basic forms, which is in our forms. I can find the form that I just created. So this is where you see the list of all the forms, the Power Pages forms that are created. So you can see here, I have golf course during PCC. So if I open this up, Here we go. We can see all the options that I previously selected. So the name, which form I want, that it's inserts. You can see insert, edit, read only. Think of this as like the other interface on steroids. Now, if I actually go to the web page where I put that, so that is the create. So the create new golf course. Now you'll see here that there's actually a lookup that says basic form. So I could, in theory, choose that. Now, what I'd actually have to do is I would have to go to the language specific version. So what I could go to is I could go basic form here, and I could select my golf course during PCC form. Click save. And what I'm also going to do here is, just as a proof of concept, I'm going to remove this liquid tag. I'm just going to move that just like that. So now I've updated this one to not use liquid and the content of the page to put it on. But instead use this basic form lookup, which again, that wasn't accessible at all through the Power Pages Design Studio. So this is kind of a different, probably older way of doing it. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go sync on this page because I've changed something in the model-driven app directly. So I'm going to load this, and I'm going to preview, and I'm going to see if my form still appears. And you'll see that the form doesn't appear. Now, the reason for that is not every page template. So when you create a web page, you select a page template. Not every page template is coded in such a way that it understands when you use that lookup that you have in the backend. So when you use this lookup, in addition to just setting this, you have to ensure that the template that you're using for the page, which in this case I'm using the default studio template, this default studio template isn't aware of this field and doesn't care about this field. However, if I were to switch my page template, page settings, I'll just do that this way here. If I change this to something else, let me see what options I've got. Let's try full page. I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to use the preview and go to desktop because that clears the cache because I've made a change directly in Dataverse, and we'll see if that gets me my form here. So there it is. So now because I'm using a template that's, as part of that template's been coded into it to understand that lookup that appears on the basic form, now my form exists. So those are the two ways. Back in the day, it was really kind of popular to use that lookup. These days, because most people are leveraging the Power Pages Studio, the liquid include is I think more popular. But just know that those are the kind of the two different ways that a form, and it also applies to multi-step forms, which we'll talk about here in a second. But those are kind of the two main ways that it gets on the page, and that's specifically it's usually more the liquid technique these days as well because it's kind of just so easy with the Power Pages Design Studio. So Zoe just kind of pointed out that, so if you add a form with Power Pages Builder, it doesn't update that basic form lookup. Is that an issue? And so yeah, basically that's just kind of unrelated. The fact that your content has the form in it is unrelated to that lookup. So that lookup is just kind of an old historical way of doing it that relies on the template. If you don't want to worry about that, use the liquid. So if that lookup is empty, you don't have to worry about it. If you're using the liquid technique, then that's fine. This is only if you want to kind of use that if it's built into the template itself. Now let me just take a quick peek. If I look at the page templates themselves, which is up here, I'm just going to restrict this to that. So you can see here, full page is one of these rewrite templates. So you can't even see the code. So the only way to know is to try it, whether or not it supports those fields. So I would, again, I would say that's kind of an older way of doing it. One that I wouldn't be too worried about. If you don't know what it does, I would stay away from that and just use the builder and the liquid tag. All right, so we've got about 14 minutes here left. Now, as I mentioned, there's some things that you can do in the Design Studio. Now I'm going to go back to my golf course thing here. I did want to show you that you can not only, so when we were here, we could say edit form, edit fields, we could manage the permissions, but you can also change things specifically about the field. So if I click on a field itself, I can say edit field. Now, the options that you get here depend on what type of field it is, but for a text field, you get a few. So we can, if that field wasn't already required, we can say, oh, I do want to make it required. I can put in a custom error message. So I can say, fill this out, dummy. And I can say, I want to show a description. Above the field, a description. And then I can also put in advanced validation, simple, regular expression, and I could set a maximum character length. So these are all the advanced options that I have. Now, earlier I mentioned that there are some things that you can do in a model-driven Power App that you can't do in Power Pages. This is an example of things that you can do on Power Pages that are above and beyond what you can just do on a regular form. Like basic out-of-the-box stuff, you can't do a regex. So these are additional things that you can do with Power Pages. So I'm going to click OK here. And then I'm going to preview. Now I need to sign in here to see some data, I think. Let me double check here. Yep. So there's my golf courses. You can see the test course that I created earlier. I'm going to go into this one. Oh, I must have been messing around with the permissions. Let me go fix that. NH golf course. Authenticated users. Right. Save. Preview. No, it still doesn't like that. Oh, right, because I switched this out. Ah, right. I switched this out to that new form that I had done, which is not what I want. Let me delete that and let me add back the form that I had created earlier, which is this one. Now, one thing I did want to point out here is that this shows blank right now because this form is an edit form. And in order to edit a record, you need to know which record you're editing. And you'll see that right now in the URL of my page, I've given it no indication as to which golf course I want to edit. So forms are often tied to lists. When I click on something on the list, you will see, oh, I got it. Edit form, golf course. Read only, redirect to a page. make sure I'm not walking all over myself here. Get latest, because I cleared that form out and now it doesn't want to save back. Let me sync this and see where we're at. So what happens when you have the same page open in too many different interfaces? So I'm just going to delete this, add a form, golf course. Says saved. Doesn't really seem like it's saving. Let's give it a chance to, because really what we should see is a preview of the form that I've selected. I don't know why that's not working. Something's not fun, having fun in the editor. I'm just going to check the edit code, open in Visual Studio Code, see if it's got that liquid code in there for me yet. Oh, yeah. So I would think that that's perhaps a issue with the little bug in the Power Pages Design Studio. There we go. So there's our form preview. So you can see that the record you're looking for couldn't be found because there's no ID. So if I go back to golf courses, click on this one, now I'm passing in the ID of the one that I want to see in the query string. So the first example I had created, it was a create step. So it didn't need a record source. But if you go in and if I go into this one and I say edit form and I can say the data is read only, what you have to do is you have to tell it where do you pull the information from. Now by default, what it does is it pulls the information from the query string and it looks for a query string parameter called ID, and that has the GUID of the record. So that's kind of how you tie the lists and the forms together. Is you have the lists. If we go back to my golf course list, this list would have links over that include the ID of the other record. So that's how you get it to kind of pre-fill that stuff. Now, of course, all the work I had done on this thing, I got to recreate that. So names, I'm going to say, just go through this quickly, show description, do that. So now we've adjusted some things there. Now if I preview this, I will see those extra fields or that extra work in here. Again, got to go back here. Every time you do the preview, it strips out that ID. It's not that smart, but now you can see that extra stuff that I did. So what I want to show you is what we saw there were kind of a handful of options that we have when we're configuring a field. Now, you've actually got quite a few more options than that, but they're only configurable within this portal management app. So if I go into basic forms, I go to golf course. What we did there was we actually created form metadata. So you can see here I created this form metadata that's attached to the name field. And that name field, we've got some additional configuration. So we've said, yes, I do want an extra description. I want it above the field, and here's my value. I made the field as required. And then I think I added a different label, attribute, control style. Oh yeah, and so I also adjusted the label. But you can see here that in addition to those, I don't know, 5 or 6 options I had in the Power Pages Design Studio, I have a bunch of other options. I can pre-populate the field. I can set the value on save. I've got additional information about if it's a lookup. I can do, here's my regular expression validation. a bunch of other validations. Now, a lot of these are actually tied to using forms as survey type applications. So if you do a survey, you want to like group different options together so that it's like, you know, you're ranking things or multiple choice, those types of things. So a lot of these things do have to do with surveys, so you can randomize option set values, that sort of thing. But basically, you can create these different metadata fields associated with the different fields that show up on your form. So some of those you can do in the Power Pages Design Studio. Again, that's like really new. That's in the last kind of few months, I think, that was introduced. Before that, you had to do all of your basic form, all of your form metadata in the back end. Okay, last thing before I look at questions here is I did want to talk about multi-step forms. At a really high level, a multi-step form is really just one of the forms that we looked at, multi-steps of the basic form. So your first form is you create it essentially the same way that what we created, but the idea is that it's more like a wizard type process. What's cool about multi-step forms is that they can actually go across different tables. So you could have the first step create a contact, the second step create an account, and the third step create an opportunity. Each one of them is their own kind of self-contained form, but you have the ability to link them together, and you can say, okay, bring data in from the second form that exists on the first form. Complicated examples of that exist in the schedule a meeting with a financial institution template. So I'll just quickly open this up, and you can see that we've got our form, but really the kind of the thing that's the same as a basic form is what they call the form steps. So you can see in this case, we've got 7 different steps involved in this form. If I open up a particular form step, then we'll have the options that are almost identical to the form itself. So it's what type, we're loading a form, but then what you can configure is what the next step is. So you configure this step and you have a next step. The only other thing I wanted to quickly mention is that what's cool about multi-step forms is you can actually have conditional steps. So that meaning that you could have the first step that says, hey, create this record. Then you have the next step would be actually not to load a form, but instead, if you say the type is condition. If you say the type is condition, and here I'm just going to create a new one so you can see what that looks like. If you say that the type is condition, this one doesn't actually load a form. What you do is you go to the condition tab and you write out your expression. So you can say, if the person put in this for a name, or if they selected this from an option dropdown, then go to the next step. Otherwise, if that condition fails, here's a different step to go to. So you have the ability to have it go to different steps depending on conditions from the previous table. All right, I know we're at time here. I did want to just quickly mention that our next call is scheduled for April 27th, and I will take a quick look at questions here. I understand if people have to drop off. If so, thank you very much. Again, thank you to Jason Gumpert at MS Dynamics World. And I will quickly look at some questions here. So, is this version of Power Pages Design Studio available in GCC? I believe the answer is yes. I believe Power Pages is GA in GCC. What's the next question here? In a multi-step form, the first step will always have to be a create form, not an edit form. Not true, because you can have, the way that we showed a list going to a form, you can have a list going to an edit multi-step form. So let's just say you wanted to allow them to edit a contact, but you want it to be in multiple steps. You could have a list that points to a page that has a multi-step form on it, and then the first step would be an edit of the contact, and you'd pass in the ID on the query string. But you are correct that often you do see that the first step in a multi-step form is create, but there's no reason it couldn't be an edit or a read-only version. But again, you have to have the source of the record somehow. The source of the record can come from the query string. It could also be related to the contact. So sometimes you can make a multi-step contact form as well. Do you have any resources that dive deep into this form? When if you can just be specific about which form you're speaking about. Jim just says he's going to try multi-step for employment application file. I think what my plan was for next month was to do lists, but got a little rushed there at the end with multi-step forms. So I'll probably dive a little bit deeper into multi-step form as well. So list isn't as quite as fully featured as all the form stuff. So let's try doing multi-step forms and lists next time. I think that's all the questions. I don't think I missed any. Scheduling with a financial. Yes, scheduling with a financial institution. Those I have Power Pages or Power Pages tips that we do. Those will be coming out in the next few weeks because those are the ones I just recorded. So I think those are coming up over the next month or so. So those dive much deeper into that. So I recorded those on Monday night, and those should be coming out in the next over the next few weeks. So that's a deep dive into the financial service one. All right, Jason.
Here I am. Thanks so much, Nick, and thanks everyone for all the questions. Very popular topic. I probably should have expected that. But yeah, great job. We have recorded today's event. We will be sharing that with you soon, as well as a link to next month's session that will be in the email follow-up as well.
Okay.
I think that is it for me.
One quick question here that I'll address. So is there any limitations regarding conditions and type of database fields you use for the conditions? The condition logic, we'll talk about that next week, but it is or next month, it is pretty specific. It's relatively limited. It's not like PowerFX or anything, but I'll cover that in the next call.
All right.